last night's Democratic policy debates. What did you think about them? What's your reaction? Are the Democrats talking about the issue in ways we understand? We understand here at FAIR. Who did you think won the debate? Who had the best immigration policy position? We're going to talk to Jennifer Hickey, who's a seasoned political prognosticator, pundit, and writes political commentary for FAIR. She also has been part of the Washington journalism establishment for many years and has worked on Capitol Hill. She really knows politics. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about Senate action. A little earlier today in the Judiciary Committee, Senator Graham has been trying to push for the Trump administration a narrow proposal to try to fix the asylum problems at the border. He bent the rules of the Senate Judiciary Committee this morning, to get a vote to push it through. And of course, a number of the senators were upset about that. The Democrats mostly. Republicans, of course, voted party line to support the bill. Senator Feinstein said the bill would never become law and essentially said that any effort to try to curtail massive asylum fraud and abuse is a dead letter in the House. Senator Graham has said he's going to try to reach out and have the White House reach out to Senator Schumer and Senators Durbin and Schumer to see what they want. But of course, we all know that what they would want would be such a high price to pay for a narrow, much needed reform bill of this kind. Well, it would be kind of like the Little Mermaid when she wanted to get legs, but she wound up paying a huge price. In the old story, The Little Mermaid, the big price you have to pay right now with the way the Democrats are controlling the House is probably something nobody would want to pay, because ultimately you would get a spoonful of enforcement in exchange for a massive ocean of amnesty. Be that as it may, I'm going to be looking at your comments and your questions about the debate last night, and whether you have any thoughts about who prevailed and who won. And Jennifer, why don't you give us your take on what you thought about the debate and how they cover the immigration issue?
Well, I think the past two nights have actually been an example of contrast. The first night you had a few more Democratic candidates who were what one would call a moderate, who do not support an overall decriminalization, do not support giving health care to illegal immigrants. And to hear those voices for the first time from presidential candidates of the Democratic Party was something I think probably refreshing and new. The one, of course, hitch is that the likelihood of them progressing any further in the primary is pretty slim. The second night featured was another interesting contrast, which was Joe Biden, the former vice president to Barack Obama, being the focus of attention, and also the Obama immigration policy coming under fierce criticism from a lot of the left-wing pro-amnesty activist candidates who were on stage. So I think the one big takeaway from the two nights is that the Democratic Party of today is far more to the left than it has been either when Bill Clinton or Barack Obama were president, and that says a lot.
So what do you think is the explanation for this radical shift?
I think part of it is driven by the activists. Part of it is driven by more liberal, more left-wing candidates being elected to office. Your Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's. And I think it's just also part of the demographics of the Democratic Party. It's more urban, coming from places where there tend to be more illegal immigrants. And it's just, I think, a nature of the often shifting political winds.
Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez suggested that people should riot if they don't agree. Some of her colleagues have been applauding civil disobedience and other things that we saw outside, I guess, the debates last night in Detroit, blocking the international tunnel between the U.S. and Canada. Which of these candidates would you say is closest to what I guess they call the squad of some Democrat radicals?
I think Julian Castro is, just in terms of the policy. He is, of course, Barack Obama's former HUD director and former mayor of San Antonio. He's actually shifted some. He used to be for border security back when he was mayor of San Antonio. That is no longer. Now he wants decriminalization and of course the general pathway to citizenship. Cory Booker, I think the former Newark mayor, is also one of those, and probably of the top tier, Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris, both senators, are probably the most left-wing.
So
which makes
a lot
Joe
of them
Biden
are attacking,
look moderate.
attacking Biden. A lot of them were attacking Biden. It seemed to me Biden was, of course, not the only Democrat who has shifted positions over the course of the years. But, I mean, if the president sits in judgment on the past, it will lose the future. I believe Winston Churchill said that. But why should Joe Biden be attacked for changing his position when all the Democrats who've been in office for any length of time are now apparently feeling they have to sound a different tune on immigration, basically anarchy at the border? Why go after Biden on account of that?
One reason and one reason only. He's the front runner.
Yeah.
And the major target. So they will find any way to do it, even, broaching the, criticism of the Obama administration, which is interesting. It's it could be a gamble, could be one that pays off, and one that the candidates will pay a price for.
So let's see. Andrew Yang made the observation that it wasn't fair to scapegoat immigrants, is what he said. He said automation is what's taking jobs, and therefore immigrants shouldn't be held responsible. Now, how do you reconcile the idea that if automation is in fact going to be taking all these jobs, why do we want to continue bringing in all this low-skill labor to do jobs that won't be there?
I think one of the points, at least as I heard what Andrew Yang was trying to make, is that all of the immigrants that we tend to focus on, in the news, are those low-skilled. But you've got the high-skilled visa workers. You've got a lot of them coming over on visa, overstaying their visas. That the immigrant in the workforce is beyond the factory floor, as he referenced. So it's not just your farmers, your agriculture industry, but illegal immigration is going to hurt workers, American workers, across the board in industries far and wide.
So therefore, isn't he kind of defeating his own case? Undermining his own argument with that robotics argument?
I think he's directing his criticism more at the robots than the low-skilled illegal immigrants. So it's a pick your poison. I think it's more of a strategic than a logical argument, but again, it's one he's making.
So Julian Castro wants to, quote, decriminalize illegal crossings, but he claims that people will still be subject to removal because of the civil penalties involved, right? And what does he think he's accomplishing by removing the criminal penalties?
I think what he believes he's accomplishing is what many of those is we see every single day, is that when immigrants are released into the interior, they stay 5, 10 years, and then they, of course, as we hear often from Democrats and the pro-amnesty activists, is that they're part of the community. So if they come in on are charged civilly, they're then released. Then they then establish themselves, and so Julian Castro is actually thinking 10 years down the line, when it's harder to argue for deportation to people who are unfamiliar with the law.
And Cory Booker's position is really kind of ambiguous. He just talks in terms of our values and that we have to be nice to people, right?
Exactly. He tends to be a man more of rhetoric than substance.
And Joe Biden seems kind of like the adult in the room, where he kind of concedes that there ought to be consequences if you jump ahead of the line.
I think he's also understanding that if he wants to get elected, he's going to have to make an argument to the American people. And as we've seen in the polls, the American people do not support decriminalization. They do not support giving illegal immigrants health care, and they certainly don't support giving illegal immigrants, free education, which is essentially what the Democratic platform is today.
So among all the candidates, really, did anybody stand out with having a remarkably different position, other than the fact that Joe Biden is kind of triangulating a little bit on it?
The different positions came from, interestingly enough, those with more state-based experience. Bullock from Montana, who's the governor of Montana, he certainly came out against it. And then also Tim Ryan, who comes from, he's a congressman from a labor-heavy district in Ohio. So a swing state and a western state. And I think that is where sort of the middle of America is where you're going to get the differing views. It will be interesting to see how the Democratic voters in those states respond.
So do any of these candidates, if they were to be matched up with Trump, where would they give him a problem on the immigration issue?
I think it's probably their ambivalence, their inability to come up with solutions. There was no, and part of this is a circumstance of the way the debates were formatted. So many people, so few questions, but we didn't get any solutions from them. If the administration
Well, yeah, the solution apparently is amnesty, citizenship, and bringing all your relatives.
Besides that, we didn't hear any promises
We have no basis for saying it's anything other than that, right, at this point?
At this point, no. There is never when a proposal is made, there's never a what next.
So there's no discussion about impact. For example, all these young people coming in from Central America, they have to go to school. When they release, they wind up getting enrolled in our usually public schools. Was there any discussion about the impacts that all these young people coming into our schools, many of whom don't have adequate English language skills or maybe in many ways deficient in terms of education at all, where is all the resources, where are the discussions about how to educate people who are now crowding into classrooms that are already overwhelmed? Was that discussed?
No, and the biggest issue to Democrat voters is health care, and there was no discussion of how they would impact deliverance of health care, either from hospitals, insurance companies, et cetera. There was just absolutely no discussion.
Was there any recognition that we live in an era of financial limits as a country and that we can't just spend unlimited amounts of money printed and borrowed from others to pay for these things?
Unfortunately, there isn't a realization at this moment in either the Democratic or Republican Party of our financial limits, but certainly it was not apparent this week.
And did there seem to be any recognition of the fact that the country has to have the ability to say no, and how a responsible person running for office, running for president, would need to be able to actually implement those laws?
No, the debates were much more focused on, as you said before, values and feelings rather than the actual rule of law, which is, the basis and the foundation of our republic.
Did any of I watched some of the debates, but I didn't see all the questions. But did anyone hold them accountable for what appeared to be vapid, unaccountable pronouncements that seemed detached from the real world?
A few of the reporters did ask follow-up questions, but as any presidential candidate does so well, most of those were avoided. And with 10 candidates on the stage over two nights, again, follow-up will be harder. Next debate a month from now, the pool will be winnowed down a little more, and so I expect that there'll probably be a little more occasion for nuanced questions. That, of course, will depend upon who's doing the questioning.
And what kind of evidence do we have? Do we have any kind of internal polling that shows that the Democrats' positions, being completely radicalized from what they were even when Barack Obama ran in 2008, that those things have traction with independents or centrists in this country?
They actually don't. There have been several polls that have come out over the recent months showing that at least 69% of independents oppose decriminalization, and a similar percentage oppose granting health care coverage to illegal immigrants. Within the Democratic Party, there's even a moderate core that are vehemently opposed, which is why David Axelrod, Barack Obama's former presidential campaign advisor, came out and said, you've got to be crazy pushing this as a party platform.
So I'll ask our listeners, which candidate do you think took the most wild and irrational policy positions on immigration last night? If you watched the debates, and judging from the Twitter feed, I don't think that many people were watching the debates, but if you were watching the debates or saw highlights, who was the most impossible to believe, out of control person on there? Who would be your assessment in terms of the most wild and unbelievable statements?
Probably Marianne Williamson, who's best known, known to anyone who knows her as Oprah's spiritual advisor and her platform of love. But in terms of the more legitimate candidates, I think Cory Booker, who just said, basically, we'll let everybody in and deal with it. So he and Kamala Harris probably were the most out of the mainstream over the 2 nights.
All right, well, I'd like to know what you think. This is basically your open season here. You can tell us what you think were some of the more extreme statements here. I'll just add this footnote to this. If you take a look at these debates and listen to what the Democratic Party candidates are saying, it seems pretty clear that we're running toward a national crisis, because there are literally hundreds of millions of people all across the world who would like to move to the United States, who respond very clearly to signals and messages this country sends from our political leadership. Anybody listening to these debates would have to wonder, why wouldn't I try to take the chance? Why wouldn't I jump in line? And in many ways, it helps really makes the problem a lot worse. But this is becoming a 5-alarm fire. This is a time to pull the emergency cord on the train here, because whatever direction this seems to be headed here, the Democrats seem to be providing the American people with simply no choice but to let as many people from around the world run across our borders and make asylum claims and expect taxpayers to pay unlimited amounts of money to come into the country. And somewhere along the way, the Trump administration is probably going to take advantage of that opening. Now today, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Senator Graham has tried to push a bill through to fix the asylum loopholes. In our view, it's too weak. In our view, it's thin gruel. But the reality is he did move that bill out of the Senate Immigration Committee. Democrats are saying it's not going to be it's never going to get passed, never going to get through the House, never going to get to the president, and therefore the Democrats seem to be giving Donald Trump an open invitation to try to bludgeon them on their failure to stand up and stop the crisis at our border. Politically, this is a calculation they're making, and Jennifer, can you tell us why they feel it's safe politically to make this calculation in light of every day seeing the pictures of people pouring into the country? Why would the Democrats not want to look like they're at least trying to solve the problem?
Because they are, I think, so deluded into thinking that this is what the American people want. You can flip the script to a certain extent, and in the House of Representatives, which is controlled by the Democrats, constantly you're getting, bill after bill coming out and passing the full House with absolutely no chances of making it to the floor of the Senate, or if it gets past the Senate, to the president's desk. So it's something they can take home, and they can, rally their voters and say, look, we've, stopped this evil asylum bill. The ranking member, Dianne Feinstein, of course, has a vested interest since it was part of a law that she helped get passed.
Right, but if you pass a law and then you see it doesn't work as intended, isn't it honestly good form to go back and fix it?
That would be the case probably if she thought that it was not working as intended.
I see a comment here, Tim Ryan. He didn't put his hand over his heart, and that was kind of a deal breaker apparently for one of our viewers.
Yeah, one of his campaign staff came out and said that he just, completely lost his mind. I don't know whether it was intended or not, but yes, that garnered a lot of Twitter feedback.
All right, well, keep your eye on that Senate package. We'll be doing that for you. And one of the things that FAIR does is work hard to educate candidates, reach out to the campaigns, give them the best information we can, try to explain to them what policies will work, what policies will not. We can't make them listen to us, of course, but we're your voice out here, giving them the real deal, the goods. And Jennifer's part of that process of providing first-class information. And you can read her blogs every day on immigrationreform.com. That's immigrationreform.com. That is FAIR's daily blog. And Jennifer and others write some excellent features there where you can keep up to date on what's happening. And as always, we couldn't do it without you. Thank you for your support. And we'll be back again with more Facebook Lives and more information on the campaign and the issue as it progresses. I'm Dan Stein with Jennifer Hickey. Thank you very much.